Okay, everyone, here we are. It is now, we are well into the 10th week of the shutdown here in Maryland. And it's been an interesting time, I think, for everyone. And so I just thought we'd chronicle a little bit about what's going on. Well, not what's going on with COVID. Get enough of that on your, social media. But, as we move forward and states are starting to reopen slowly or whatever, it's time to really start thinking about what's next. How are we going to proceed? Here at Spro, we typically have seating for 18 people total inside, and then a total of 30 in the entire place, including the outdoor seating as well as the garden seating. So it's a question now, if we're pushing social distancing, how are we going to proceed? Is it just a matter of cutting the amount of tables we have in half so that we only can seat, a lot less? So let's say, for example, in the front room, the main room where you come in and you get served, we normally have seating for 10 people there. And the back room here, what we call the lab room holds 8. And then on the deck we have 2, and so there's 20. On the back deck we have, on the garden we have a community table of 8. And then typically in the very, very front on the street for alfresco dining, we've got seating for 4. So actually that's 32 seats. So we can seat 32 people. So is it really just a question of cutting it in half, cutting it in a quarter? I'm not really sure where we're going to go yet, and the government hasn't really given us particular guidelines to consider. But what I was thinking recently last week was, right now in the front room, if you've come to the shop, you've seen that we've pretty much taken all the seating out, and we did keep our church pew there mainly because it's really impossible to move, and there's no seating. And so we're just trying to figure out what are we going to do with the back and this room here in the lab? And so you may not have heard us call it the lab room, but this is the lab room mainly because we've got, when we first opened the shop in 2010, this was our lab. We actually had it set up with for tasting and brewing and not really for use for the public or for seating, just for use for within so that we could test things. We found out right away within the first couple weeks that while the lab is a cool idea and a great concept to have, it's a great concept to have if you have a larger facility that has a lot more seating. But in a place where you only have, let's say, 10 seats in the front, suddenly that becomes very, very difficult. And so it was pretty much right away we learned that we had to get rid of it. We had to create more seating, so we got rid of we moved all of the lab equipment to a roastery at the time, which is in East Belvedere Midway, and then created seating in this room. But now that COVID has changed everything, it's really a question about what are we going to do in the space now. So some of you may have been to our new concept called the Cafe du Spro in Cockeysville, where we've really taken on putting together an experience that you would have at an old Japanese kisaten, a traditional kisaten coffee shop in Japan, where the service is very meticulous and it's very slow. I guess you compare it to what we're doing here in Hampden. So if you think that what we're doing in Hampden is quite meticulous already, it's more so. And so it's a really personal experience. And so the Cafe du Spro has been closed the entire COVID time because really the whole experience of coffee there is coming in, sitting down, being served your cup, and it's just very different than a typical American style coffee shop. And so because we can't do indoor seating, that has pushed that place to be closed for the time being. So I was thinking the other week about what can we do with this space, and I was thinking maybe we'll take that concept of the Cafe du Spro and bring it here. into this space, where when we finally reopen again, maybe this seating will be for 4 people, and you'll come in, there'll be some amount of social distancing, but you'll also be able to have coffee prepared for you by a very good barista that's going to make the coffee very carefully and very, very different. I mean, it is a very different experience, and with a different type of brewing method that we don't use typically here in Hampden. But also I was thinking that maybe we're going to not just incorporate the style of service, but also maybe even add on a much more in-depth tea service. So if you've ever been to places like the Sakurai tea experience in Tokyo, or maybe even to, what's it called, Apartment 29 in New York City, something along that line. We have access to really wonderful teas, and we want to we've always wanted to present teas in a very thoughtful manner. And so I figured that we would create this series of videos to talk about, and just work out the ideas as we go along. It'll probably take a little while to really do it, but I thought we'd bring you along for the ride, because it might be kind of fun to see how it develops. So in this space, I have set up what I'm thinking about, right? So this is kind of sort of the idea. So there'll be maybe we'll put a bar in here, and one that is a low bar, maybe table height. Maybe table height so we can utilize the table bases. So as you can see, we've got these table bases, right? And if we can repurpose those for this room, that might be, one of the better routes to go, because we're trying to, because things have been pretty tight here, we can't rush out and spend thousands of dollars on a redesign. Really, it's going to be about taking what we have and trying to make something special out of that. And so I'm thinking right now that we'll get rid of the tabletops, of course, and then create a continuous counter that will be the place where we service. Now the question has really been, how much space does one need? So let's say if we take this cappuccino cup, right? And let's bring it closer so we can get a little better idea what's happening here. So now the question is, if you're a guest, how much space do you need to enjoy your coffee? Right? So in part of what I've been looking at is there are what we call, what they call in Japan called izakaya. And izakayas tend to be these small shops. And there's actually a Netflix TV show called Midnight Diner that's based on an izakaya. And what they have is they have this, the guests sit at their bar, and and like in a lot of shops, a lot of the places you go in Japan, like ramen shops and stuff like that, they'll give you some space, and then there's a little like wall, and then there's another shelf here where they'll put your food, and you'll put it back down, and you'll put it back. And then there, on the other side of that little wall, there's usually workspace that the person preparing your food can use. So I was thinking about maybe doing something like that. Of course, at the Cafe du Spro, we kind of left it open, flat topped, but the bar is higher, and so that's something to think about. But we left it open because I like the open space as well. Sometimes I wonder if we have a wall here, will the guest feel cramped? And so part of that is also to figure out, how much space does one really need? So, does one need 10 inches? And so it's here. Is 10 inches enough? I mean, that, for this cup, yeah, that's pretty good. This table itself is 20 inches wide. At the end of the day, we might only go to 18 inches, We'll go to 18 inches. So that'll cut off 2 inches of this. But one of the things that we have to consider also in this space is that there's only so much width of the space itself. So for example, this is pretty much the width of the room. So the width of the room is just under 12 feet, right? So if we have 18 inches here, we also need ideally 3 feet, 36 inches would be the best area, workspace area for the barista. And then we also typically will need, you know, counter space. And then we do have to fit, health code regulations require that we fit a hand wash sink here. So that has to go back into the space. And so those are so many, those have certain depths. You know, your typical refrigerator or worktop counter is 30 inches. And so you can get them small. You can get the counter is shorter, shallower, but if you put equipment in, then you really can't. And so, however, 30 inches plus 36 inches, so you're already at 6 feet. And then you have, let's say, 18 inches. So you're at what, 4.5 feet? Let's say 5 feet total, right? And now you have, this can't be. Oh no, this is not 12. This is probably 9. Let's double check this measurement here. The main room is 12. This is 9, I think. Yeah, this is just about 9.5 feet wide. So if we're already talking 5 feet, we've lost more than half of the space, and we still need to have enough space for other guests to walk through here on their way out to the outer door, which both serves as a doorway to the garden as well as to, in case of egress, you know, in case there's any kind of a problem, emergency that people have to leave. So you really can't block too much of this pathway. As you can see, there is a pathway here. So we have to be cognizant of that and develop a plan. We have to develop a plan that can incorporate enough space for a guest to sit at the bar, enough space for other guests to pass through, and then enough space for the barista to work, and then have enough space for the barista to do their work, right? We will need grinders to grind coffee and storage areas for, you know, whatever accessories we're using. Yeah, so that's pretty much what we need to work on in this space. So that's kind of what we're thinking right now. Maybe do like a kind of backdoor kisaten here at Hampden, and yeah. So that's where we're at the moment. We're gonna progress along, and we'll bring you along with us to see how it goes. And yeah, so hopefully you guys are all doing well and safe during these COVID times. I know they're releasing the restrictions, but don't go too crazy. You know, restraint is always good. It's just like drinking. You don't want to power down a whole bottle of tequila. That usually never works out well. So, but all right. So until next time, thanks for tuning in.